we've talked a little bit in person on the phone a little bit about the issue of divorce.
Yes.
Your perspective on divorce. You said on the one hand that you were glad that Kim Cooks is her name, or Kim Mark?
The judge?
Yeah.
Kim Cooks, yeah.
Kim Cooks handles things quickly, but one of the things that I've been personally trying to change would be the unilateral no-fault divorce laws.
Yep.
I think that in many instances, the innocent person, if there's an innocent person, gets victimized by the spouse, gets re-victimized by the state, often has to pay, like in your situation where you now have to pay $24,000 a year almost to your ex-wife, who is a doctor who makes probably more than you do. I don't know. You know, she makes a lot of money, I'm sure, as a pediatrician. You can be thrown into jail. You can have your passport taken away from you. You can have your driver's license taken away from you. You can have your vehicle registered. All of these different things that can take place here. And yet, the only reason, prior to getting the divorce, you would have been considered a very fit person. I mean, you're very I've talked with you, and I'm in awe of the things that you've done and your accomplishments. But the issue of, to get back to the issue of unilateral no-fault divorce, what are your thoughts about that? Because I see this as being, to some degree, the head of the snake of all of these things. It's the foundational problem that if we would address that issue, some of these other issues would be minimized or fall away.
The problem, the fundamental problem is philosophical. And we're Americans, and we don't like to talk about this kind of stuff. We don't like to talk about problems like that, right? But there was a radical redefinition of what marriage was. Marriage was conceived after the sexual revolution as something that was done primarily for the emotional fulfillment of the parties.
That's a brand new historical definition, isn't it?
Yes, it's completely brand new. It just erupts. Right in the 60s, and it was essentially codified into law in the 70s. With no-fault divorce laws. So we've misconstrued what marriage actually is. The second thing is that it has changed marriage from a promise to a mere living arrangement with no strings attached. It's the only contract or promise that you can enter into in America and unilaterally break with no consequences.
Right.
And it's extremely strange, and it's a complete violation of our entire legal tradition and our whole moral tradition.
And not to mention the fact that it is, you mentioned earlier about the religious liberty issue, because many marriages are still conducted in the church. In the Catholic Church, it's considered a sacrament. In the Protestant Church, an ordinance. I'm not sure what it's considered in the Orthodox Church.
It's a sacrament.
It's a sacrament. So in no other sacrament can the state step in and say, screw your sacrament. Your sacrament means nothing. You two people have taken this sacrament. You've made vows to God before all of these people. And I would look at that covenant, that vow, as being even more solid, should be more protected than even a contract. But the contract is there as well.
It's very peculiar that contract law and contract theory have not been applied to marriage. And let me give you, you've spoken eloquently about this idea that, why can't people add additional conditions to their marriage? That would be enforceable like any other contract. That makes perfect sense to me, right? However, just think of it this way with children. This is one thing that I've noticed. There's a notion in the law of a government taking of property. And this happens when, say you own a piece of land, and the government puts such onerous restrictions, maybe environmental restrictions or other restrictions, on your development and use of the land, that the courts ultimately recognize it was a de facto taking of the land. And then the government has to pay you for it, and basically take ownership of it. Right? This happens every day with children.
With children and yes.
So, if you look at the rights that I'm actually able to exercise over my child, I'm pretty lucky. I'm a joint managing conservator. But I'm not even able to stop my son from being sexually mutilated. I can't even stop that. Now, if you don't have the ability to influence your child's development, growth in your own social and moral beliefs, it really constitutes a taking at civil law. And marriage law is adjudicated under the civil rules. It's a civil case, right? So I think that we should apply contract law. We should apply these ideas to marriage. And if we think about it that way, we can't have no-fault divorce.
Right.
In the same way we can't have a no-fault business contract.
Right. Right.
Right? Everyone has a duty at minimum to exercise due care, to come to the table with clean hands, and to avoid committing fraud.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, even if you look at the Texas Family Code, they talk about that spouses have a duty to support.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
And the idea of insupportability, what does that mean?
Yeah.
We throw these fancy, highfalutin words out there, and nobody knows what they mean. So then if you don't know what they mean, they can mean anything. They can be described, they can be defined at will, they can be implemented. It's not this, it's like Stephen Baskerville says, when the family courts stop instituting justice, they actually start forcing injustice.
Correct.
And in a situation like this, the injustice is not just against you, but it's against your children. So it's injustice and abuse both that the courts are doing right now.
Absolutely right. And you know, the one of the shocking things I've discovered in this process is that there are two kinds of cases in the Anglo legal tradition. There are cases at law and cases at equity. Family courts are courts of equity. I mean, if you go to some of these, conferences of family law judges, they brag about the fact they don't have to follow the law. Right. That they're courts of equity. Yeah. And so they're broadly entitled to come up with solutions that are, achieve equity. That is, they benefit both parties. Yeah. But now here's. I think we should eliminate that. I think we should revamp our statutes and make family courts courts of law. Yeah. And it would make the appellate process much more just. It would make everything more just. Yeah. I heard one man speak about this court of equity, and he said, historically speaking, the court of equity was a situation in which somebody technically broke a law, but they went to try to, in a sense, plead with the king or whoever it was, and it would almost be like saying you would talk to Billy Graham, and Billy Graham would say, I've heard his case. Mr. King, I think you should change it. The court of equity should not be a court to inflict injustice. Correct. It should be a case to which to say, you know what, something is wrong here, and you need to fix it. Yes. And right now, unfortunately, the fix is always that whoever wants out always wins. Whoever has lawyered up always wins. I'll tell you a story that my lawyer told me, and I thought this was a very illustrative story. So, there's a woman. She has primary possession of her children. She was working. A next door neighbor offered to do childcare for her, right? And she knew this woman. She started doing childcare. After she had spent enough time in childcare with this woman then sued her for child support and for possession of the children. Now this is totally illegal. Right. Totally illegal in every way. Right. The judge gave this woman's children to her neighbor, even though it was against the law. And the judge told the lawyer, I just didn't like your client. And that's enough in family court to get things done. Now, I want to make just one, so I'm under temporary orders that I think definitely are unconstitutional under both the state constitution and the federal constitution. But the associate judge that issued those orders, I have to tell you, is about the only judge I've ever seen anywhere in that Dallas court bill. His name is Judge Beauchamp, Scott Beauchamp. If you go into it, watch cases in his court, he treats everybody in the court exactly the same way. He's as hard on the lawyers as he is on the pro se. He cuts just as much slack to the pro se as he cuts to the lawyers. He doesn't let the lawyers get away with not following procedures. He doesn't let the pro se. He's totally fair to people that walk in there. He has exactly the same stuff. And I've just never seen a judge be able to be fair to people he clearly does not like. In fact, if he doesn't like them, he's almost a little more fair to them to compensate for his So there really are judges who can do this, and what it points up is the vast importance of judicial elections, which we're not paying enough attention to. My judge, Kim Cooks, ran unopposed in the last election, for example. Yeah.